Here's another moment of like theatrics that I thought was odd. Here.
Stand right there. That is not your nature to just stand where you're told to stand. Give it a try.
Stand right there. That is not your nature to stand where you're told to stand, but give it a try.
Okay, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that you take this obligation freely without any mental reservation?
Bernie gets so bullied and I'm sick of it. Yeah. Stop bullying the old man. Okay. Now, everyone, speaking of Bernie, he's in a little bit of trouble because he had a critique on the H-1B visa program. And I don't disagree with Bernie Sanders' critique, even though I haven't read the entirety of what he was saying. So maybe there's some stuff in there that's actually crazy and like nativist or whatever. But the H-1B visa program absolutely is utilized in a way to create further expendable and more exploitable labor. I don't know why people consider that to be racist and unacceptable to openly say. I have been saying it nonstop. I haven't stopped saying that as well. So I don't know why people would get mad at Bernie Sanders also saying it, because I mean, that is the purpose of this program. Of course, once again, anything that the government does is going to be packaged in a way that makes sense. So the H-1B visa program is going to be packaged as though this is a way to offer citizenship to the best and brightest all around the globe. And there is certainly some truth to that as well, right? That is true. But that's just spin at the end of the day. The reality of the matter is we destroy the global south and then we take advantage of all of the highest achievers globally by creating an immigration structure where we take educated workers in an effort to displace the American workforce, because those guys will, due to the currency exchange rate, especially if they're sending money back home, they are oftentimes interested or willing to take on jobs at a pay cut. But more importantly than that, if an H-1B visa worker loses their job, they get deported. So if an H-1B visa worker loses their job and they get deported, they are even more exploitable. So the solution to make this process more ethical and not a mechanism to displace and depress American wages is to ensure that there are safeguards that maintain wage parity and a parity for benefits offered and a protection, additional protections offered to all workers, including H-1B visa workers, protection from deportation, for example. Now, if you were to do that, then that makes sense. Then bosses can't use the H-1B visa program to create a hyper exploitable secondary labor market. That's the real solution. But of course, that solution is not necessarily one that benefits the capital owners. It says liberals calling Bernie anti-immigrant for correctly pointing out that corporations love H-1Bs because it lets them exploit immigrant workers is real rich considering how ready and willing, yada, yada, yada. Armand Domaluski responds and says, we're calling Bernie out because he, A, explicitly lies about the program, saying it covers cashiers and dog walkers, and B, he parrots reactionary arguments about immigrants cutting American wages, which is a flat-out lie. Not that long ago, only a couple months prior, he says Kamala Harris ended the Trump border crisis. The audacity, barbarism critic says, the audacity of these libs have to pretend they weren't repeating right-wing border crisis bullshit and promoting Donald Trump's immigration bill not 2 months ago. I wonder what's worse for immigrants, reforming the H-1B program or shutting down the border. They truly expect none of us to have a longer memory than Dianne Feinstein. I think the irony also revolves around, and we're going to go back to, a different time where, well, lo and behold, Bernie Sanders still is warning about H-1B foreign workers replacing American labor. Let's take a look.
Corporations whose main argument is, we just can't find Americans to do this work, and we just need to go all over the world to bring people in. If you listen to them, they will tell you two things. First, in terms of low-skilled jobs, they say they need foreign workers to do the jobs that Americans just won't do. And then, Madam President, this is what really gets me. They tell us that they need more H-1B visas because Americans are just not smart.
I do see a lot of myself in Bernie, I'm not going to lie, where people constantly misunderstand his position, yell at him endlessly, and act like he's brand new, act like he's behaving brand new. And then you go back in time No matter how far back you go in time, he literally is saying the same exact things. And it's ironic. Like, I can't in good conscience understand how so many liberals are chirping at Bernie Sanders over the H-1B visa take, okay? Claiming that this is racism, claiming that this is white nationalism, when those very same liberals, not that long ago before the election, were hyping up Donald Trump's border bill that Joe Brandon was pushing. So which is it? It makes no sense. On the one hand, these guys are like, we got to do border control. I'm a Democrat, by the way. But then simultaneously, they're like, wait, what? You mean that in a sector where there is unimaginable layoffs, these guys still have room for H-1B visa workers? Because it kind of feels like it's used as a mechanism to displace the existing American labor force and bring in, without any sort of wage parity initiatives, create a structure where you are basically taking advantage of a labor force, an educated labor force that's coming from overseas, from countries that we have dominated for years and kept poor for the most part. Bernie is the real racist. So, Bernie Sanders is in a lot of hot water. Let's take a look at what he said. He wrote this yesterday. The current chairman of the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions today releases the following statement on H-1B guest worker visas and the recent debate concerning the program. Bernie said, there has been a lot of discussion lately about the H-1B guest worker program. Elon Musk and a number of other billionaire tech company owners have argued that this federal program is vital to our economy because of the scarcity of the highly skilled American engineers and other tech workers. I disagree. The main function of the H-1B visa program and other guest worker initiatives is not to hire the best and the brightest, but rather to replace good-paying American jobs with low-wage indentured servants from abroad. The cheaper the labor they hire, the more money the billionaires make. Where's the issue with this statement? This is 100% correct. The notion that there aren't skilled American tech workers out there that could be doing these jobs is completely, the notion that there are none in the current labor pool is not only silly, it's an abject lie. It's a lie that is channeled through mainstream resources as well, especially when you consider the hundreds of thousands of layoffs that have taken place in our Silicon Valley quantitative easing induced bubble that finally burst a little bit. In 2022 and 2023, the top 30 corporations using this program laid off at least 85,000 American workers while they hired over 34,000 new H-1B guest workers. There are estimates that as many as 33% of all new information technology jobs in America are being filled by guest workers. Further, according to the Census Bureau data, there are millions of Americans with advanced degrees in science, technology, engineering, and math who are not currently employed in those professions. If there is really a shortage of skilled tech workers in America, why did Tesla lay off over 7,500 American workers this year, including many software developers and engineers at its factory in Austin, Texas, while being approved to employ thousands of H-1B guest workers? Moreover, if these jobs are only going to the best and brightest, why has Tesla employed H-1B guest workers as associate accountants for as little as $58,000, associate mechanical engineers for as little as $70,000 a year, and associate material planners for as little as $80,000 a year? Those don't sound like highly specialized jobs that are for the top 0.1%, Musk claimed this week. If this program is really supposed to be about importing workers with highly advanced degrees in science and technology, why are H-1B guest workers being employed as dog trainers, massage therapists, cooks, and English teachers? Can we really not find English teachers in America? Let's be clear. To the extent that there may be labor shortages in our country in some highly specialized areas that need to be filled by employees from above through the H-1B program, we must utilize this program as a very short-term and temporary approach. In the long term, if the United States is going to be able to compete in a global economy, we must make sure that we have the best educated workforce in the world. And one way to help make that happen is to substantially increase the guest worker fees large corporations pay to fund scholarships, apprenticeships, and job training opportunities for American workers. This is something that I have advocated for from my first days as a U.S. Senator. Further, We also must significantly raise the minimum wage for guest workers, allow them to easily switch jobs, and make sure that corporations are required to aggressively recruit American workers first before they can hire workers from overseas. The widespread corporate abuse of the H-1B program must be ended. Bottom line, it should never be cheaper for a corporation to hire a guest worker from overseas than an American worker. Now, of course, what's interesting about this process is that because the H-1B worker structure benefits capital owners, both the Democratic Party and the Republicans will end up defending it. They will defend it because, not because they are, nice, or because they want immigration into the country, or because they love, the idea that America is a land of prosperity for the migrants that are coming in here, well-educated migrants that are coming in here to work these jobs. They only care because, once again, there is additional exploitation, which means that profits will go up because it means that you can depress wages further. So that is the real reason. And the real reason why people can be endlessly racist to the undocumented migrants on both sides of the aisle as well is because there is always an endless well of undocumented migrants that are crossing the border to come and work at these very low wage jobs. Now we're not talking about the H-1B visa program. Now we're talking about migration patterns. And the more people take a reactionary stance towards migration from either party, the easier it is to dominate them. And the more you dominate them, the more you dehumanize them, the easier it is to exploit them. There will never come a time where, no matter how cruel the border policies are, where people from Guatemala, people from Mexico, people from El Salvador and many other places are not going to seek refuge in the United States of America. They will always come to the United States of America because of what we have done to their countries. We've destabilized them. Mr. Musk, Mr. Ramaswamy, and others have argued that we need a highly skilled and well-educated workforce. They are right. But the answer, however, is not to bring in cheap labor from abroad. The answer is to hire qualified American workers first and to make certain that we have an education system that produces the kind of workforce that our country needs for the jobs of the future. And that's not just engineering. We are in desperate need of more doctors, nurses, dentists, teachers, electricians, plumbers, and a host of other professions. 30 years ago, the economic elite and political establishment in both major parties told us not to worry about the loss of blue-collar manufacturing jobs that would come as a result of disastrous, unfettered trade agreements like NAFTA and permanent normal trade relations with China. They promised that those lost jobs would be more than offset by the many good-paying white-collar information technology jobs that would be created in the United States. Well, that turned out to be a big lie. Not only have corporations exported millions of blue-collar manufacturing jobs to China, Mexico, and other low-wage countries, they are now importing hundreds of thousands of low-paid guest workers from abroad to fill the white-collar technology jobs that are available. At a time of massive income and wealth inequality, when the richest 3 people in America now own more wealth than the bottom half of our country, and when the CEOs of major corporations make almost 300 times more than their average workers, we need fundamental changes in our economic policies. We need an economy that works for all, not just the few. And one important way forward in that direction is to bring about major reforms in the H-1B program. Most of this argument from the right unironically stem from white nativist anti-immigrant stances. They think Indians and the Chinese are lesser than they are, okay? They get mad that Indian workers and Chinese workers are replacing them. But they would get mad if it was Polish workers as well. Trust me, because there is a real, beyond the white supremacy, there's a real anger and resentment that people feel that they misdirect towards their fellow workers. There is no difference between a Indian worker or an Italian worker or a Polish worker and an American worker. There is no difference there at all. They have the same exact class interests. My read of this is that 2 things to be true. Bernie's right in pointing out the inherent exploitations of the existing H-1B system and providing common sense reforms to fix them, while also being wrong to make a nativist adjacent argument about it. Americans should get jobs first instead of just welcoming immigrants as Americans. It feels incongruous for him to support easing immigration restrictions while making this argument. The only part of this that comes across as like a little, if you're hypersensitive and don't believe that Bernie Sanders cares about like migrants or whatever, like there's a couple parts where he just like basically talks about like these have to be American workers first. How is Americans should get the jobs first a little nativist, bro? But I don't think it is. I don't think it is at all. Because if you understand the H-1B visa guest worker program to be created specifically to displace the American labor pool with an easier to exploit labor force that you ship from overseas, then yeah, of course you're going to say, no, you got to make sure that you hire Americans first in the United States of America. Because if you don't do that, then you arrive at another point that Bernie Sanders makes very clearly here. You arrive at NAFTA. You arrive at permanent normal trade relations with China. He's absolutely right about that. We talk about how American manufacturing was gutted and destroyed. We talk about the ghost cities in middle America, where places that relied on one corporation basically dominating the town and being its lifeline, only to leave that town and leave it desolate as a consequence. And they leave that town because they ship the manufacturing jobs overseas. The liberal take on what he said is in fact the racist take. So my attitude on this has always been that there is enough wealth to go around, whether it be through the H-1B visa program, whether it be the processing and documenting of the 10 million plus undocumented migrants that work in the agricultural sector, in the construction field, and create wage parity for them so that they are not used as an endlessly replaceable, hyper exploited second labor pool, a permanent underclass that is used against the documented U.S. labor force. That is the real solution. That is the real way to get out of this problem. But of course, that would require shrinking profit margins, and that would be unacceptable.